आपकी तबीयत बेहतर बेहतर ब्लड प्रेशर की जो दवाएं
ملائكته يسلمون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله. حي على السلام حي على السلام حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. Only son worship or mercy done Allah Jal in the Quran and be Muhammad and Mustafa Mubarak Nabi Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم وسمى كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال الشان كل شيء هالك إلا وجه كل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يرى نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحم من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وأروة مثقى قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقالوا ما لنا لا نرى رجالا كنا نعدهم من الأشرار اتخذناهم سخريا أم زاغت عليهم الأبصار صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I begin by advising myself and all of you to adopt the taqwa of Allah as is the best of provisions. The verse that I chose for today's discussion is from Surah Sad, verse number 62. And as we are approaching the holy month of Muharram al-Haram, which begins most likely from Tuesday, will be the first, and the solemn commemoration of the martyrdom of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein ibn Ali, alayhi salatu wassalam, along with his companions, which is regarded as the greatest sacrifice in the history of mankind, will begin. People of all walks of life, circle, the madhab, religions, and sects will remember the shahadat of Imam Hussein, especially on the day of Ashur, by discussing the philosophy of shahadat, by discussing how the shahadat of Hussein ibn Ali is that cornerstone, that key element, and that vital element in the progress of Islam and preventing it from complete annihilation as it was facing by the hands of Yazid. So it is appropriate as we prepare the followers of Maktab-e Ahl Bayt especially, and others as well, we need to keep a few things in our perspective to not deviate from the message of Imam Hussein, to not misconstrue or let it misconstrue, mix with false claims and teachings and fabricated riwayat. Keep it clean and keep it pure, because there's nothing which will make it more heart-wrenching than what it is already there in the books of history. I recited this ayah, and I'll get to why I chose this ayah. Surah Sad, verse 62 says, and they will say, why is it that we do not see here men whom we used to count amongst the evil ones, the bad ones? وَمَا لَنَا مَا لَنَا رِجَالًا كُنَّا نَعُدُّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَشْرَارِ. Why is it that we don't see those whom we consider to be ashrar, plural of those who are committing shar and evil? Why is it we don't see those people here? and ridiculing them, or do our eyes miss them here? In Tafsir Nur al-Taqalain, there's a riwayat that a person said, I entered upon our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. Imam said to me, فَقَالَ كَيْفَ أَصْحَابُكَ قُلْتُ وَاللَّهِ لَنَحْنُ إِنْدَهُمْ أَشَرْ مِنَ الْيَهُودِ وَالنَّصَارَ وَالَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا. A group of Shia came to sixth Imam and he asked and complained that there's a group of people who call them Rafidi and consider us to be polytheists, worse than Jews and Christians. Imam responded by saying, فَقَالَ أَمَا وَاللَّهِ لَا يَدْخُلُ النَّارِ مِنْكُمْ إِثْنَانِ وَلَا وَاللَّهِ وَلَا وَاحِدٌ إِنَّكُمُ الَّذِينَ قَالَ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ وَقَالُوا مَا لَنَا لَا نَرَى رِجَالًا كُنَّا نَعُدُّهُمْ مِنَ الْأَشْرَارِ. Imam said this to him. He said, you will attain, you were, by God, not two of you, not a one of you will ever enter this Jahannam, this Nar. And these are the people who will be in Nar looking upon, saying, where are those people we used to consider them evil? Where are those people whom we thought were evildoers on the land? How come we don't see them? And Imam recited this ayat of Surah Sad, verse number 62. He said, you will attain our shafa'at while they will be looking for you in the hell. And then Imam recited this ayat, why is it that we do not see the men whom we consider to be amongst those who are bad ones? It has become a norm these days to label mu'mineen with different terms, to call them with ridiculous names. Ayat of Surah Hujurat condemn the fact. Do not call people by names in a sense, that you use titles which are ridiculing them, which are making fun of them or mocking them after, their names have been given to them in the Islamic manner. Surah Nisa also, when people not only call others by name, but also associate that faithlessness to them as well. The ayat of Surah Nisa is clear about it, number 94, which says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ أَلْقَى إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَامَ لَسْتَ مُؤْمِنًا. Do not consider or call someone who offers you peace, saying salam unto you, that you are not a believer. The fact of the matter, a person is saying salamun alaykum to you, and he's known that he's a Muslim, he's a mu'min. Don't label that person to be a kafir or an unbeliever or a disbeliever. Of course, this comparison is a result of these people condemning some of the practices of Azadari. This has to do a great deal with it, and as we approach Muharram al-Haram, how we practice and the things that we do sometimes lead others to believe in this way. And since these practices are sha'airullah, sha'air Husseini, and the acts of Imam Hussein are in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects. He's Imam Ma'asum according to us. So his acts will not be against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't think anyone who even doesn't consider Imam Hussein to be amongst the infallibles won't think for a second that Sayyida Shabab Ahlil Jannah will have an action that is against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with that said, the actions that Imam Hussein took when he embarked on this journey and he faced the Yazid of his time and he toppled that empire. Of course, people thought that Imam was defeated, but it was only after a few years they realized the real victory was with those 72 companions of Sayyid al-Shuhada. So these are Sha'air Husseini, the slogans which are eventually are Sha'airullah. In Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Sha'airullah, Inna Safa wal Marwata min Sha'airullah. Not only the Safa and Marwa, but even the Qurbani that you give is from the Sha'air of Allah. Budn, Qala'id, all of those things that are associated with this animal that is being sacrificed is called what? Sha'airullah. So when an animal that is sacrificed in Eid al-Adha is called Sha'airullah, then the Qurbani that Sayyid al-Shuhada gave for the irrigation of this religion will not be considered amongst the Sha'air of Allah. So with that said, concerted efforts are underway to undermine the sanctity of this greatest practice of Azadari every year, especially during Muharram al-Haram, when we should be concentrating on the reform of ourselves. Instead, we are made to deviate from the reality and kept busy in unrealistic things. And that sometimes takes the focus away from what was the purpose that Imam Hussein ﷺ really stood for. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with that said, the examples that I want to bring and to cover today in the brief time that I have, I would require your utmost attention towards it. Azadari is imminent for our existence. Someone would say, well, the Christians don't practice Azadari. They still exist, right? The Jews don't practice Azadari. They still exist. Other nations and the madahib in the world don't practice Azadari. Azadari, if someone doesn't know what that means, is the commemoration during the 2 months of Muharram and Safar, remembering the Shahadat of Sayyid al-Shuhada. There are gatherings of majalis where Latmiya is recited, where mourning is done, where majalis and the speakers give speeches regarding the Shahadat of Sayyid al-Shuhada and his companions, and to revive what took place in the history so that we are not losing track of our historical records. So that's what Azadari is. So I keep on repeating the word. Maybe some may not understand what it means. So it is imminent for our existence. You say, well, how is it possible that non-Muslim don't commemorate it? Even certain other madahib in Islam don't necessarily commemorate it the way we commemorate it. So what does that mean? Meaning that the followers of Ahlul Bayt, how does that reflect then? How does that mean that it is imminent for our existence? It is imminent for our existence for this very reason, that the followers of Ahlul Bayt, in the meaning of Shia and Tashayyu, were few in numbers, were outnumbered by the other existing madhahib. And for a minority to survive, it needs some spark, it needs something solid. What did they hold on to? They did tamassuk to this azah. All the Muslims practice, the wajibat are there, the muharramat are there, and some went in different directions. For example, I don't want to label any, but this is historically there. For example, you look at the other deviations from madhab tashayyu. You got the Ismailis, and then amongst the Ismailis, you have other, segments that came out from the Ismailis. Then you go towards the Agha Khanis, and you go towards, the Bohras and the others that exist. All of them that might be practicing somewhere in the world, but the fact that, a lot of their teachings did not remain and connected with the pure Islam is the fact of the matter that they did not stay close to the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Otherwise, if they had, they would also be at the same place where Madhab al-Tashayyu is today, that it is considered to be a major power amongst the world religions that exist, and even amongst the sects of Islam. When you talk about, you say, well, Shia and Sunni. Nobody really comes around and says the Bohras and the Ismailis and the Al-Khanis, the, this or that. You got two main streams that are usually discussed, the Shias and the Sunnis. And the fact of the matter that how close they are to each other. With, of course, minor differences that exist, but the closeness that exists, usually people talk about these two madahib in Islam. So, well, Islam, Shia and Sunni. These are the two madhahib that people usually name. You go to academia over here as well. What Islam? Oh, Islam is made up of two mainstream, Shias and Sunnis. This is usually what people. The fact of the matter that while being a minority, the Shias survived. That's what it means that Azadari is imminent to our existence. I hope it makes sense. A yearly reminder about the tragedy of Karbala is like the daily reminder of Salat that keeps us on track. You pray 5 times a day. Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, keeps you away from indecency and evil. 5 times a day. Every time you are inclined towards some sort of indecency from various different means, Salat reminds you of that and cleanses. It says Azadari on a yearly basis is a reminder to go back to that history of ours, which is so strong and rich, and the tragic at the same time, so that we don't lose focus from it. Shias around the world all have different ways of expressing. I want to now focus more on our inner circle. That, different places in the world where you have the Shia population that exists, starting from, for example, Iran, Iraq, subcontinent, India, and Pakistan, the various different spots where you have the majority of them, the followers of Maktab al-Tashayyu, and even if they're in minorities, they are freely expressing their commemoration. It's not a hidden factor. Only place where you would find that it is suppressed of all the countries in the world, it would be Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where you have the two grand mosques where Islam came about. That is the only place where you find that there's a ban on the commemoration. Otherwise, if you go to the other countries in the world, whether it's European countries or the North American hemisphere, Southern hemisphere, you go to the Southeast Asia, you go to other areas of the world, you don't find such suppression. Why suppression over there? Well, of course, that is another topic for another day. So we see that Shias all around the world have different ways of expressing their grief. An Iraqi and an Irani might not have a clue about how Indian and Pakistani expresses their feelings and commemorates the Aza of Sayyid Shah. Aside from the few main common themes, there are many practices that we have within our own ways of doing things are different. And we would say the same thing when we walk into an Aza in majlis of, for example, predominantly Iranis or Iraqis. We say, well, some of the things that they're doing, you're not accustomed to seeing it. That's okay. You're not accustomed to seeing it. Don't label it to be wrong, nor should they impose those things upon you. Oh, you must do this, because that's not part of religion. It is part of their culture. Aza is part of the deen, but how you commemorate it is not part of the madhab, and madhab did not come and say, well, you have to do it in this way. So therefore, different people might have different ways of expressing. For example, I've attended the processions of Ashura in Iran. If any of you have attended, you might have seen them with big drums and they're beating on the drums. You might even get offended. So why do they have drums on the day of Ashura during the procession? The drums, you should not be there. But that's the way they have been brought up doing it. So that's a cultural thing. Nor should they impose it upon you. No, you should do it as well. Nor do we go ahead and condemn it, saying, oh, this is a malpractice, this is not good, and this is labeling that. And the fact of the matter that a lot of these things are cultural, we should not be imposing them on others. I think that's the main bottom line that I'm trying to say. The notion that how are we going to face Bibi Fatmatul Zahra Salamullahi alayha on the day of judgment, right? That's when we will get to see our beloved Prophet, the Ma'asumeen, Janab Sayyida. How are we going to face, for example, if we haven't done a majlis in our house, if we haven't brought out the proper alam and the taboot on certain days, if we haven't brought out the jhula of Hazrat Ali Asghar, for example, or the Mehndi of Hazrat Qasim, for example, how are we going to face Bibi Fatmatul Zahra Salamullah alayha? If these remind you of the tragedy of Karbala, these all things that I mentioned, and increase your love for Imam Hussein and his family, these are very good. You should do it. In fact, you should continue on doing all of these things, whether it has to do with the alam, with the taboot, doing a majlis at home, the jhula, the mehndi, all of these things. If they increase your love for Imam Hussein, go ahead. Because they don't contradict with the wajib or haram. So as long as that is the case, and it's increasing your love for Ahlul Bayt by reminding you, for example, you would remember the tragedy of Karbala more when you bring out the jhula of Hazrat Ali Asghar. It brings the riqqat to you. Nothing wrong with it. Alam of Hazrat Abbas, for example, is a symbol. The taboot of Imam Hussein, for example, all of these are symbols. If it increases your love for Imam Hussein and his family, it is good, but you shouldn't expect other cultures to, for example, be part of it and impose that upon them. Oh, you don't do this, you're not Shia. Don't do that. That's not how it is. If someone coming from another culture of madhab al-tashayyu or another culture where they have love and respect for Ahlul Bayt, but they don't necessarily do these certain things, we shouldn't just label them, or you have exited the realm of the madhab. And therefore, there are many of us who have done matam with our hands only all our lives. We haven't done it with other tools of matam that are used in this day and age. Does that mean I have less love for Imam Hussein because I've only done matam with my hands? Or the one who has done matam with other tools, their love for Imam Hussein is more than mine, and that becomes the gauge and the measure of the love of someone for Sayyid al-Shuhada? That if you bleed, only then you have more love. If you don't, then you don't really have love for Sayyid al-Shuhada, or you're less. These should not be the gauges and the measurement tools for us. I think the real question we should be asking is, how are we going to face Bibi Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha when we have suppressed the message of Imam Hussein from reaching far and wide? That's when we should be ashamed of facing them, when we have suppressed the message. This message should have gone out. People should have heard about it. When we are fighting with each other over our petty differences during the majalis, such as this is not cooked in our house, for example, on Ashura, or this is not worn from where I come from, and we don't do this in this way or that way, those are not the real concerns of Bibi Fatimatu Zahra. The fact that we all do it differently tells you that it is to do with culture and not so much with the madhab of Ahlul Bayt. When we're unable to show good akhlaq with Azadaran Hussein and those who come for the majlis of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and we use bad akhlaq towards them, then we should be ashamed of facing Bibi Fatimatu Zahra. Men should be asking themselves, how are we going to face Janab Sayyida when we have lied, cheated, ridiculed, mocked people unnecessarily, or when we have consumed haram on purpose, when we utilize interest and usury in our transactions and mix our wealth with haram, and with that haram we go ahead and contribute towards the tabarruk or other things. That's when we should be questioning us. Our women should be asking themselves, how are we going to face Bibi Fatimatu Zahra salamullah alaiha when we have failed to observe the hijab that she was preaching, or ridiculing those who strive to follow the commands? They should be saying, how are we going to face Janab Sayyida? When we have learned nothing from the akhlaq of Bibi Zainab, when we think that it is okay for us to dance or sing in front of na-mahram at our weddings of our daughters or sons, that's when we should be questioning, how are we going to face Bibi Zainab, Bibi Fatimatu Zahra salamullah alaiha, and not when you're unable to bring, for example, niyaz, or you're not able to contribute towards the majalis. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So you've been listening to the sacrifice of Imam Hussein and his companions for many years. I'm bringing towards the close. Develop insight. Transfer them from your ears to your hearts. We only hear through our ears, and sometimes we don't even let it make it to the second ear. Or if it goes to the second ear, we let it out from the second ear. No. Transfer it from your ears to your heart. That message should not just remain in your ears and exit from it. Your Husseini, it should be displayed with your character, in your character. You're an enemy of Yazid. Your behavior should be void of Yazidi characteristics. Come to Majlis with pure hearts, with pure intentions. It is a worship. It is an ibadah. It is the dhikr of Ma'asum. Purify yourself externally and internally. That's how one should make his way or her way towards the majlis. Ulama have greater responsibility of spreading the message of Ahlul Bayt. They have the prayers of Sayyid al-Shuhada and Fatimatu Zahra. Zakir of Ahlul Bayt has a very high status. Even people treat them with respect. When a zakir comes, regardless of their background, their ethnicity, the color of their skin, the moment the person ascends on the mimbar, we have respect for that person. He's got more knowledge than us. And he's speaking and telling us about Imam Hussein, telling us about the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. So right away, there's respect that we have for them. Prepare yourself to listen to Quran. Ahadith, Imam Hussein was reciting Quran from the tip of the spear. And you don't want to listen to Quran? You don't want to listen to the tafsir of Quran? We want to listen to something which is maybe a fairy tale or made up story or a dream, translation of someone's dream, and just to gain certain wawa and to bring more riqat, fabricated masaib. The musibat of Sayyid al-Shuhada and Ahl Bayt is already heart-wrenching. You don't need to make new masaib to go ahead and cause more riqat to people. Keep that in mind, because whatever you utter from your tongue, the ahadith of the tragedy of Hazrat Abbas, if we alter the message of Imam Hussein and Bibi Zainab today or add fake stories to it, we are not better than Umar Asad and Shimr, who did the same thing by killing Imam and the companions. They wanted to suppress the message of Imam Hussein from reaching far and wide. We are doing the same thing by altering the message of Imam Hussein. What's the difference between us and the enemies at that time? So masaib of Ahl Bayt are already heart-wrenching. No need to invent fake masaib. Remember what Bibi Zainab said upon returning to Karbala. Oh Hussein, I took your message everywhere, from Sham, from Kufa to Sham and the bazaar and the streets of Kufa and Sham. But yes, I had to pay a hefty price. My chadar was taken away from me. But I delivered the message. And that's what the essence of Karbala is. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the tawfiq that we're able to practice this solemn commemoration which is approaching us, and we anticipate a great deal for it in the best possible way, in a way that Ma'asumin are satisfied with us, in a way that Rasulullah is satisfied with us, in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is radhi with our practices. Inna asal hadith wa ablagh al-mu'izah kitabullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا اله الا هو الحليم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم. سبحان من سبقت رحمته وغضبه وبسط اليدين بالرحمه. سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا الا دون وسعها وفعل السيئات ولم يجاز بها. سبحان من لا يزداد ولا معصي لعباد الا كرما وجودا ولا كثر الذنوب الا عفوا وصفا. نشهد ان لا اله الا هو لا تغفر العباد بجود والعباد والمظلمين بحلمه. ونشهد ان محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمه للعالمين. لقد امركم الله في محكم كتابه بصلاته على نبيه وحبيبه فقال تعليما لكم وتشريفا للسفي ان الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا ايها الذين امنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه واله وعلى امام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين امير المؤمنين علي بن ابي طالب صلوات الله عليه وعلى سيده النساء العالمين بدة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمه بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء ولي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر ولي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي ولي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاه والسلام. اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ماهر آثار البدع والطغيان هادم ابن الشرك والنفاق حاسد فروع البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه ولا آباء الكرام اتصلت الليالي والايام. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه والتفضل على أمراء المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الإقبال وعلو الدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أحل ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أحله بجاه محمد وآل المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. ومن يذكر فتنفعه الذكر ان الله يغفر بالذات واللسان وايتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل، قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين، وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا، بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. وإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائمة قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار بجاه محمد وآله الأطهار. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. ربنا أفرغ علينا الصبر وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين بجاه محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. تسبيح فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. All together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. To all of you. Let's recognize the sponsors for today's families, Gilani family and the Bahawa family. Please thank the Father for their marhumun, especially our father Diwali, Gulbano, Muhammad Ali, Hai, Barakat Ali, please thank the Father for all of these, as well as your own deceased marhumun, to the Father. Also, let's pray for those who are sick, going through a difficult time, struggling physically, spiritually, financially, especially due to COVID. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring an end to their stress and give them a quick recovery. Let's recite this ayah from Surah An-Naml together 5 times, especially for Fatima and Muhammad. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Amma yujibul mutarrida wa yashfu 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض إله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون. Inshallah, as I mentioned it Muharram al-Haram is upon us. The majalis here in Masjid-e-Ali will start from the day of the first of Muharram, which is expected to be Tuesday, August 10th. So the majalis, the system of majalis will start regardless of moon sighting. Will start from Tuesday, and it will go until 21st of August, the 12 nights, straight forward from 1st till Ashra, the day of Ashura, and then inshallah 2 majalis after that for the Soyam of Inshallah, which will take place over here. Your cooperation is highly required in these solemn days and nights when we gather and commemorate, especially due to COVID-19, which is still threatening in the form of the new variant Delta. Therefore, I'm sure people are eager to come after a while. Last year, we didn't have this opportunity. This year, people will be making use of this opportunity that the doors of Masjid and other idars in New Jersey are open. They would want to go. So inshallah, this year we have 2 very knowledgeable scholars which will be visiting us both in English and addressing in Urdu. In English, our well-known guest who visited us on numerous occasions, Sheikh Abdul Jalil Nawi, who will be visiting us inshallah from Maryland, and then Malana Hajjat Islam Sayyid Nafis Khair, who is going to be visiting us from Atlanta. Both of these ulama will be addressing the 12 nights. Majalis will take place simultaneously in Urdu and English. So whoever wants to benefit from the Urdu, they can go to Hazrat Abu Talib Hall, which is across, and whoever wants to benefit from the English speech can stay here in the Masjid Hall. Men will be upstairs using these 3 halls that we have. These doors will be open for extension if there are more people. And then our respected sisters will be, inshallah, utilizing the banquet halls in the basement, where we have Imam Hassan Mustafa Hall, we have the Zainab Salamullah Alaiha Hall, and the Fatima Salamullah Alaiha Hall. Those halls will be utilized by our sisters, and respected halls will be receiving either Urdu or the English transmission. So your cooperation again is needed. I know we've seen an increase in our Jummah as well. A lot of people are now coming back to the Salat al-Jum'ah. Similarly, we expect this number to quadruple from 5 times, 6 times more when it comes to Ayyam al-Azad. So detailed email will inshallah be going out soon with all the protocols in place for your safety, for your security, whether it has to do with the security of the cars and your children or the safety from this virus. Inshallah, we'll have those protocols in place. A lot of volunteers are going to be doing all of these things, so please follow their instructions as you've always done so, keeping your emotions intact and in check, inshallah, so that don't let the emotion get the best of you. So we anticipate a very healthy, spiritually uplifting Muharram and Ayam Hazah. Inshallah, we should be starting from this upcoming Tuesday, August 10th. So, الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر
الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله وقوته يقوم ويقول بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على
محمد. تسبيح فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام. وأسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل خاسئ فقير بائس مسكين مستقيم مستجير لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع ومن قلب لا يخشى ومن علم لا ينفع ومن صلاة لا ترفع ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر والفرج بعد الكرب والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Recite the dua based on the stress and the pandemic, and may Allah ease out all the tension and stress and give us the strength and courage to commemorate this Yam Azad according to the expectation of our holy Imam. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum ya Nabi Azad. Assalamu alaikum ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alaikum Sayyid Salahin. Assalamu alaikum wa ahlul Nubuwwah Jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamullahi kamalat tamu shamilul amu wa sawatu daimatu wa barakatuh qaimatu tama ala hujjatillahi wa waliyyi bi ardi wa biladi wa khalifati ala khalqi wa wadi sulalat an-nubuwwa wa baqiyat al-fitra wa safat sahat al-zaman wa mudr al-iman wa mulakkal ahkam al-Qur'an wa mutahhir al-azm wa nashir al-adl fi tul wal ars wal hujjat al-qaim al-mahdi al-imam al-muntazir al-marziyya وابن الأئمة الطاهرين الوصية ابن الأوصياء المزيين هذه المعصوم من الأئمة الخطاة المعصومين. السلام عليكم أيها المؤمنين المستضعفين अस्सलाम अलैका या मुदिल्ल काफिरीन अल मुतकब्बिरीन अल ज़ालिमीन। अस्सलाम अलैका या मौला साहिब ज़मान यब्ना रसूलुल्लाह यब्ना अमीरुल मोमिनीन यब्ना फातिमा ज़हरा सय्यदुन निसाइल आलमीन यब्ना अहमदुल हुज्जतिल मासूमीन वल इमाम अल खल्क़ अजमाइन। अस्सलाम अलैका या मौला इस्लाम मुखलिस लक फिल विलायत अशहदु अन्नका इमाम अल महदी कौलन व अदलन व अंत लज़ी तमलउ अर्ज़ किस्तम व अदलन व आदम व यज़ुल्लम व जौरम फअज्जल lahu फरजा व सखला मखरजा व गर व ज़मानक व कसरा इंसान व वानक व जदलक मा वादक व हुवा अस्तकुल क़ाइलीन व नरीदु अन्नमुन्ना अल्लज़ी नस्तज़इफु फिल अर्ज़ि व नजअलहुम अइम्मतन नजअलहुम वारिसीना या मौला या साहिब ज़मान यब्ना रसूलुल्लाह हाजती कज़ा व कज़ा। Raise your hand and recite your hajat. Please recite the Imam say extra convenience and recite your Yet is Samazi is the Gasa
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma salli ala Ya Rasulullah.